made you a lot, and that's only because of the Democrats.
Hello and welcome once again to Worldview on Dialogus. I am Vishal Dahiya. This week we're going to talk about an issue which is likely to have a lot of ramifications at a global level, although it is restricted to the domestic aspects of the United States of America. In fact, the US federal government has shut down. On 1st of October at 12:01 a.m., the US federal government and its various departments shut down because of the lack of financial funding being cleared by the US Parliament. Now, effectively, if we look at this scenario, the questions which are asked is, how can a government shut down? Yes, in fact, the US Constitution has these provisions. From 1976 onwards, there have been 21 shutdowns in the United States of America. And the longest one has been in 2018-19 under the leadership of none other than President Donald Trump. That was for approximately 35 days and costed billions of dollars to the US economy. Now, this, of course, has ramifications and implications as far as domestic US economy and for the US citizens. But largely speaking, if it continues for a longer period, then it might have impact on the global economic scenario as well. Today, we will try and understand how does the US government shut down. That's one. And two, why does it happen? And three, is there a way out this time around given the highly charged political atmosphere in United States of America? And for more on this, we're joined by two distinguished experts today. Let me first introduce them to you. We have with us Ms. Meera Shankar, former Indian ambassador to United States of America. Welcome, ma'am, to Worldview on Dialogus. We're also joined by Mr. Sanjay, who is the chairperson of Politeia Research Foundation. Mr. Sanjay, welcome to you as well on the show here. I'll begin with you, Mr. Shankar, since you've been there in the United States of America. None other than you would be more qualified to go ahead and explain to our viewers as to, how does a government shut down? Because as far as we look at, when we look at our democracy, our government also has to get the consent of the parliament for the annual budget. But, it doesn't shut down at all. It looks like none of these more than dozen appropriation bills which were to be cleared by the US Senate and House have not got the consent.
Yes, I think that's because there's a difference in the model of governance that India follows, which is Westminster-based parliamentary democracy, and the US model, which is an executive federal model with a president and a Congress. And what can happen is, unlike in India, where the leader of the majority party is the prime minister and therefore able to push his legislation through the parliament, since he is the leader of the majority party. In the US, it is the president who is directly elected, but his executive powers do not include the powers of budgetary appropriation or taxation. That is with the Congress. And it quite often happens that the Congress may not necessarily be with the same party that wins the presidency. Now, in Trump's case, he is in the fortunate position where he has both the houses with him, the House of Representatives as well as the Senate, but the majority is slim. And in the Senate, while the Republicans have a majority, the Democrats have been engaging in a filibuster, which then requires a majority of 60 votes out of 100 to actually overrule it or to break the filibuster, which meant that Trump would have needed, in the normal course, some number of Democrats to support him. And of course, one of his Republican senators, Rand Paul, also voted against. So the appropriations bills were not, did not find consensus. Now, normally, what happens in India, for instance, when you have the budget or the budget has not been approved in detail, or a detailed budget has yet to be prepared and presented, what the government does is they take a vote on account, which means that you can continue the government at the same levels of spending which were approved in the previous year.
Something which is known as CR, which is being talked about in the media circle. CR, the short form.
So in the US, the government, the administration sought a continuing resolution, that's what it's called in the US, which would have been like a vote on account, which would have allowed the government to remain open till November and therefore have more time to negotiate the passage of the various appropriations bills. But the Democrats, you see, Charles Schumer, the leader of the Democrats in the Senate, and the Democrats as a whole in the Senate, had cooperated with Trump when he passed his big, beautiful bill, as he said. And for that, actually, their base, the Democratic base, was extremely unhappy and then sought actually the resignation of some of the Democratic senators who had gone along with Trump in the search for consensus on the big, beautiful bill. So this time around, the Democrats have dug their heels in. And the main issue is healthcare.
We'll come to that part, the healthcare part a little bit later. And you rightly explained the entire situation, Mr. Shankar. In fact, that is where we stand now, a highly charged political atmosphere, Democrats, fighting for carrying on with their vote bank in terms of their promises to their respective constituents in their constituencies, not trying to go ahead and give a message that they are bowing down once again to Republicans or President Trump's demands as far as budgetary allocations are concerned. Mr. Sanjay, economically speaking, and when we talk about these finer intricacies of the US domestic economic policies, as we understand, the bone of contention here is the big beautiful bill, because in that particular bill there were several social security measures, specifically with respect to the healthcare. They were cut down, something which didn't go down well with the Democrat supporters and of course the Democrats as well. Now the only negotiating point which is left is on the healthcare allocation for the healthcare. How do you think this is going to play out? Because let's not forget that this is not the first time that Trump administration or the presidency under Trump is dealing with the government shutdown. It went on for 35 long days in 2018 as well. So is Trump administration and Republicans, are they ready for this battle to drag on for that much longer period?
It looks like that, but if you see the number of government shutdowns in the past decade, let us assume if you start from 2013, onwards, till now, there are about 5 shutdowns, which means the number of shutdowns in American politics or in American administration has been increasing in the recent past. Which is an indication, very clear indication that there is growing polarization in American polity, and therefore the political parties are finding it very difficult to find a common ground. So that is one of the most important things that we are seeing in American politics, and the current shutdown is another manifestation of the collapse of trust between the political parties and also between the president and the Democratic parties. I mean, if you look at Democratic parties, they also complain, not just in addition to healthcare, that president is creatively reinterpreting the legislative processes. For instance, he has been accused, his administration has been criticized by Democrats that he is stopping funding to democratically elected governments in various states. For instance, to a tune of $26 billion has been stopped to various state governments for federally funded programs. Similarly, of that, approximately $8 billion of funding was stopped for green energy programs. So that's another dimension. And there is also lack of trust that even if the government, even if the legislature, the current US Congress, passes these appropriation bills or funding bills, that the President Trump will actually implement it. So therefore, the Democrats are making one more demand. That is, we want an assurance that once we pass these funding bills, that you will spend these funding bills and not stall funding to certain critical areas. Coming to healthcare, what you said is very important. That healthcare has been a sticking point because fundamentally, philosophically, many of the Republicans have been very uncomfortable with Obamacare, as they call it, or Affordable Care Act, which gives a lot of subsidies, which includes people who have been left out of the health insurance schemes into the ACA. And therefore, many of the Republicans have been calling for cut to the subsidies, which Democrats are finding it very difficult. In fact, if you see, the debate is not about any specific additional provision that the Republicans have brought in. It's about the cuts that have been initiated in the healthcare program, in the ACA and Medicaid and those things. And the Democrats are demanding that these should be restored and they should have longer lifespans. So therefore, that has been a significant bone of contention between the Democrats and the Republicans.
Meanwhile, Mr. Shankar, as Mr. Sanjay was also referring to it, and you were also earlier pointing out vis-a-vis the issue of, healthcare, that is, some call it Obamacare or Medicaid as well. This seems a very, very politically charged issue because, one, it involves immigrant population as well. And both Republicans and Democrats have very strong views on that aspect. In fact, President Trump in his second term has come out with very stringent policies to deal with illegal immigration. And healthcare, becomes a part of that umbrella concept which the Trump administration is moving ahead with vis-a-vis the illegal immigrants. So that is one. And two, as Mr. Sanjay also pointed out, a highly charged political atmosphere, both Democrats and Republicans, deeply entrenched with their respective stands. Their supporters also not willing to budge and, cede even an inch as far as the dialogue and discussion are concerned. So in that situation, how does it work out?
Well, it's going to be, I think, both sides digging in for some time. So I think we can expect a slightly longer shutdown. But in all such cases, eventually the two sides get together and find some compromise. We've seen it when President Bill Clinton was the president and Newt Gingrich had just got elected, and he and his Republicans, brought the system government to a halt. But eventually the two of them, got together and hammered out a compromise, which was acceptable to both sides. Now, in the current atmosphere, it looks very difficult. But at the end of the day, I think the Republicans are hoping that some Democrats will, leave the Democratic solidarity and vote with them. They are putting this whole continuing resolution to a vote, continuing to put it to a vote in the hope that somebody deserts the Democrats, but the Democrats are holding solid. Though I think one or two Democrats did vote with the Republicans, but they need 8 Democrats because Senator Rand Paul, who's a Republican, had voted against the continuing resolution. So it looks like both sides will dig in for some time. On the one hand, the Democratic base is saying you can't so easily allow the Trump administration victory over hard-won social programs, because the US was the only developed country in the world which did not have a system of universal health care. And so this was the big reform under the Obama administration. And what the Democrats are now demanding is that the tax credits which were given under Obamacare and the cuts which were made in the funding for programs under Obamacare should be restored. Now, Trump and the Republicans are showing no signs of seeking compromise, and they want to appeal to their base, the MAGA base, that we are going to use this as an opportunity to slim down the government. So about, I think, a large number of federal government employees, I think 750,000, have been asked to go on furlough.
Yes.
Furlough means you go on leave without pay. And in the meanwhile, the Trump administration is pushing ahead with seeking to close some of those government departments' jobs permanently. So they want to pursue their agenda of slimmer government. They've already wanted close the Department of Education, cut programs drastically for environment and green energy and so on, done away with diversity, inclusion and equity departments or officers who were recruited under those heads. So they have already implemented a large part of their agenda when, Elon Musk was heading that agency for government efficiency. And now they want to use this as an opportunity to push this further. So for the moment, sides seem to be entrenched in their positions. And whereas earlier the Democrats were showing signs of being helpful in terms of passage of the big, beautiful bill, now their base is also pushing them to take a tougher line on President Trump. I guess that this is going to lead to a halt to government, but the immigration programs will continue, border security will continue, and I think it's the other programs, funding to democratic states, etc., which Trump is going to hold back on.
Okay, so there are clear lines, dividing lines, and we understand as well that what will get impacted and what won't get impacted. But Sanjay ji, as Mr. Shankar was pointing out, between 7 lakh to 8 lakh, federal government employees will be on furlough. Most of them might be asked to go ahead and continue working without pay as well. Not sure whether they'll get this amount paid from the federal government once the bill is cleared. But apart from that, the threat of layoffs as well coming from nowhere less than the White House. These all are key important points when we talk about how internally the situation is very charged up. But apart from that, its economic impact might also throw a wider net, because if it continues for a longer period, there might be delay in reporting of key data sets, key economic data sets, and that might have an impact on the markets, the US markets, again having a sort of a trickle-down effect on global economy or global markets elsewhere as well. So this is not a very pretty situation.
Indeed, what we are witnessing, if this continues for a longer period of time, unlike the earlier shutdowns, this time the shutdown is happening in a context when there is a lot of global uncertainty. So that's one of the important things to be noted. Coming back to the point about furlough of 750,000 people who have been furloughed, generally the previous experiences have been that once they get back to the work or the bill gets cleared, the salary that they lost will be compensated for. We have to wait and see if something similar happens. Generally, it happens. And the other important dimension that we need to recognize here is what is Trump's long-term strategy. Trump's long-term strategy has been to reduce the corporate tax. He wants to reduce corporate tax because he believes once you reduce the corporate tax, a lot of foreign firms will come and invest in United States, make United States the headquarters, and manufacture there, so that you can get the advantage of manufacturing in United States, paying low corporate tax. That's his long-term strategy. And for that, he needs to cut down expenditure in various places. And one of the places that the Republicans have often wanted to cut down expenditure so that is the healthcare that all of us have been discussing.
Mhm.
But that is proves to be a serious point of contention because this has been one of the places, United States, where healthcare, social security in the developed world has been pretty weak, and Obama administration sought to address that problem. Now, if you're trying to cut expenditure there, it will have larger ramifications across society, and the Democrats are unwilling to do so. So so at a larger philosophical economic thinking, there is this disjunction between the Democrats and the Republicans. Republicans want to bring down the corporate tax, hoping it will spur economic activity. The Democrats believe that social security should not be sacrificed for such an approach. On the international dimensions, yes, if you see the current environment, Trump has gone ahead and imposed tariffs on various countries exporting their commodities into the United States. And there is still a lot of data that is being awaited on what are the implications of these tariffs on the US economy. And second, as you rightly pointed out, the data on unemployment is still not clear. And if it does not get released on time, it may generate suspicions about the scale of unemployment or the kind of impact that Trump's economic policies are having on the US economy. And so therefore, it may generate certain amount of market uncertainty. I mean, all this is contingent on one fact, that is, if the lockdown or the shutdown continues for a longer periods of time. But if it gets resolved within a few days, then the impact will not be as negative as we are assuming now.
Okay, let's hope these, both sides figure a way out. But Mr. Shankar, since we're talking about the domestic issues of the United States of America and the challenges being faced by President Trump and his administration and the kind of policies he's been pursuing or putting forth, it's not just limited to the economic agenda domestically and internationally, which of course we were talking about for the last 20 minutes in terms of the US budget, the US economic policies, its impact both domestically and on the global economic order as well. But of late, there is one very important issue which has attracted a lot of attention and criticism as well, more so domestically than internationally. That is one recent military commanders conference, which was chaired by President Trump and his Secretary of Defense, which of course is now Secretary of War, and the kind of statements which were made by both gentlemen there in that conference in terms of the way US military should prepare itself for any theater of war, giving a sort of an indication that they should look more inwards in terms of maybe domestic deployment and all. That seemingly has not gone down well with at all the US citizens or the experts or those who keep a close watch on the policy there. What is he trying to achieve? Can we just throw some light on that? Where is it going now?
Look, I think the whole MAGA agenda was that the US has got embroiled in too many foreign military interventions or adventures, and that has cost it in terms of both lives and money, and has had a bad impact on the US economy. Therefore, they wanted a more limited approach to foreign intervention and focus on rebuilding US economic strength back home. So Trump, of course, has not been very clear. He's veered between isolationism, which has also been a streak in the US system, and some kind of imperialism, based on resources. So suddenly he lay claim to Greenland or lay claim to Canada, and or send in gunboats to prevent smuggling from Venezuela. So it's not clear. He's veering between two stools. But by and large, it seems that in terms of the defense policy which might get adopted, they still haven't adopted their new, strategic policy doctrine or defense policy, that the security and defense of the homeland will be given the top priority, and say the challenge from China is much lower down in terms of the US perspective at this stage. And that's what Trump was saying, basically. Now, the US Army is not generally allowed in terms of their legal system to take, to be deployed for in internal security duty. And unless there's a crisis or something, in the past, some presidents have sent in the Marines when there were riots, but not in the normal course. Now, Trump has deployed National Guards, who are like a reserve army. They are the Army Reserve. They can be called upon to go to wars in the event, to fight in the event of wars. He's pulled out the National Guards and deployed them in Washington, D.C., now in Portland, Oregon, and then also he wants to deploy them in Chicago. Now, they don't have policing powers or powers of arrest. So in DC, where they are deployed, they have to call the police to actually come and arrest anybody. So he's changing the whole system. And I think the other aspect in that speech, which was notable and which, may cause issues, is that they spoke, both Pete Hegseth and Trump, more Pete Hegseth, spoke against woke policies which they felt had weakened the army, and that there would be no place in the future for diversity, inclusion, and equity hires, and that is why they had fired them. And the point is that the US Army has been the one place which has a large portion of minorities, blacks, colored people, who are white, who go and work in the army for a certain number of years. And it's been the biggest force for national integration in the United States. How this is going to play out, I really don't know. But
in
both
fact,
these
yes.
things, changing the nature of the military's role and limiting it to internal security, which they are not geared to, because they really are trained to kill. They are not geared to civilian policing, and saying that they should train in our cities. I think that's quite dangerous and actually goes against the very framework within which the military operates in the US.
Okay. And the woke policies which you mentioned, I remember, one portion of Secretary of Defense or Secretary of War's speech where he mentioned that there is no place for beardos now in the US military. Mr. Sanjay, before we bring this to an end, we would like to seek your views also on this very important aspect. Economy is, of course, one key area where domestically there are a lot of challenges for President Trump. But he seems to be opening another front now, domestically, when he is trying to bring in drastic, radical changes of the role of the US military on the homeland, and of course, the policies which govern the US military as well.
Indeed. As Ambassador Meera Shankar pointed out, the military is not equipped to deal generally in many countries, including in the United States, to deal with domestic situations because they are not empowered with legislations and rules, regulations to carry out certain activities. But if you look at the recent military commanders meeting that both Secretary for War and US President addressed, for many international observers, it came as a disappointment because generally when you call in commanders from different parts of the world who are serving in the United States defense forces, all the three forces, and they are sitting there with the president. You would expect them to discuss about the global geopolitical situation and how we should reshape our defense forces to meet the new challenges. But the discussion did not talk about it. What are the global challenges that the United States is going to face in the next 5 years or 10 years or 15 years? And what does the US commander president, the United States president, want his commanders to plan? How does he want his defense forces to spend their expenditure? How do they want to integrate technology into defense forces to meet the new challenges? These are all the kinds of things you would expect to be discussed between the US president and the large number of military commanders who were pulled in from different bases across the world, but that did not happen. That again tells you that the current US administration is very focused on conveying messages to the domestic audience rather than trying to deal with the global situation in a very comprehensive manner and trying to build a coordinated, cohesive global strategy. So therefore, that thing came out very clearly in the commanders meeting that US president has addressed. The fact that they were talking about things like whether soldiers should have beards or not, that the scale of detail which can be left out to other junior officers. Instead, it is the very senior political leadership that is dealing with these issues. And again, it has become a platform for contesting what the Republicans call about the woke politics. The fact that they are talking about highest male standards will be the standard for the military training, again, is an indication that the whole discussion was about responding to domestic politics, but it was not a platform for communicating with his own commanders about the global geopolitics and his grand strategy. And second, he did not use those platforms to communicate with the world leaders on what he intends to do on the global geopolitical situations.
Okay, so there it is. And of course, another dichotomy of this entire situation is that while on one hand, President Trump is seeking Nobel Peace Prize, claiming that he is playing a very important role in resolving armed conflicts across the globe. On the other hand, he has changed his a Secretary of Defense designation to Secretary of War, which technically is not even Secretary of War until it gets Senate approval and goes through several other stages as well. So a lot of confusion there as well as far as domestic policies are concerned. But let's hope that, as far as economic issues are involved, both sides, that is Republicans and Democrats, will be able to find a way as far as continuing resolution is concerned, and maybe resolving the crisis of the US government shutdown, because it will have economic ramifications beyond a point on the international scale as well. Of course, the domestic population of the United States of America will be affected by this shutdown, how so long it might continue. Thank you so much, Mr. Meera Shankar and Mr. Sanjay Pulipaka as well, for joining us here on this show and explaining to our viewers as to all the details about the US government shutdown, its impact, implications domestically and internationally as well, and other domestic challenges being faced by Trump and his administration in his second term as the President of the United States of America. Meanwhile, keep watching Worldview, and for the viewers, please don't forget to subscribe to Dialogues. Thank you.